Welcome to the third of a three-part series on workforce development. My name is Chris Martin. I'm going to introduce our presenters in a second, but this webinar series has been brought to us by the Ironworker Employers Association of Central Pennsylvania. We want to thank them for their effort and support through this. If you have any questions today, feel free to submit your questions through the app that you're in. And our previous two webinars, The Power of Partnership and 4 Ways to Combat Workforce Shortages, are available at ironworkerslocal404.org. And once we have a recording of this webinar, we'll be sharing that with you as well as a follow-up. So again, if you have any questions, feel free. And if for some reason we run out of time throughout this and we don't get to your questions, we will follow up with an email response. So thank you in advance, but again, please submit your questions. So today we're talking about technology and how that has an impact on workforce development, specifically around the ironworkers and the construction industry as a whole. And to really try to put it into perspective, this isn't just a regional or a local issue. This is a national issue. As you can see on the screen, we've got about 80% of contractors throughout the country have reported that they're having difficulty hiring. And this is based on the AGC National Worker Shortage Survey. Here in Pennsylvania, and I know we have some participants who are outside of Pennsylvania. Welcome and thank you. But 83% of Pennsylvania contractors are having challenges. So that's what we want to talk about today, and how does technology help us? So with that, I would like to introduce our speakers. With us is Dave D'Acquilente and Jessica Tribus. And if you would both please introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a little bit more. Dave, could you go first, please?
Sure. Good morning, Chris. Appreciate the opportunity to participate today. I think it's an important topic as we push forward in the construction industry, and thankful for those that have attended or will listen to this after the fact. So I've been with the Ironworker Employers Association of Western Pennsylvania for about 2 years. We're an organization that goes back to the late 1950s, early 1960s, represent the union contractors in the ironworking space here in the western portion of Pennsylvania. Our contractors provide services nationwide, but have a heavy regional and local footprint. So excited about the opportunity to talk with you all today about where we see technology and our construction space moving forward.
Jessica, could you share a little bit about yourself and SimCoach?
Sure. I'm the founder of SimCoach Games, which is a 15-year-old company. It was a spin out of Carnegie Mellon, where I was on the faculty there for 14 years, looking at how can we use video games to effectively communicate, to train folks and for learning. And I'm also really involved, at least at a state level, on workforce development boards and the policies surrounding what needs to happen in schools to engage folks with respect to the K through 12 pipeline into apprenticeships or further training, as well as what industry needs are around workforce development.
So we definitely have the right people to be talking about technology and workforce development today. So thank you both for being here. I appreciate your time and effort. And with that, let's start to talk a little bit about how technology and construction are converging together. Dave, could you share some thoughts?
Sure. I think it's hard for us to get away from technology in our personal or professional lives. And while construction as an industry, the trades in many ways are still very ancient. The pyramids were built, although a larger scale, in the same way that masonry is handled and managed today. So we've got a way to come in terms of an industry. But if we don't continue to look forward and look at what's next and ways to incorporate pieces of technology into our applications, our operations, we will be left behind, like the pyramids. And so I think embracing technology, whether it be for training in terms of an apprenticeship standpoint or on-the-job productivity, are critical pieces of where we're looking and where we're incorporating today. Be remiss if I didn't talk about safety as an aspect of our industry, which can be dangerous, but there's a lot of technology that's engaged with the effort around safety now and reducing those opportunities for incidents. So there you go.
Great. Jess, what are your thoughts? Jessica.
Yeah, just a high level, obviously we have access to very, very powerful computing, even in our pockets, represented with the smartphones that we all carry. And those, as everyone knows, are powerful tools for not only engaging and interacting with information, but collecting information, collecting data. And then another level of the fact that all of these devices and the information are connected, sharing that information to be more productive, to be more safe, to be more efficient. And there's just a lot of ways that this can be applied, obviously, in the construction industry as we use this information to make better decisions.
And better decisions are obviously leading to improved safety and productivity, as you both mentioned. So that's fantastic. So let's move forward here a little bit. Dave, where do you see the industry heading as it relates to technology?
So I think, I briefly mentioned earlier the apprenticeship aspect, where we're looking at whether it's workforce development or training those that are already committed to becoming skilled craftsmen. The safety aspect runs through every level of construction, and the supervision and productivity piece is key as we look to do more with less, whether it be the baby boomer cliff or whether it was the Great Recession, 2008, 2009, that changed the labor landscape. Technology has made inroads and has helped address some of those things. From an apprenticeship standpoint, something as simple as looking at scheduling using an application or a computer system, taking it out of an old school paper process that gets a little cumbersome when you are in a growth period like we are. The ironworkers in Pittsburgh specifically have grown under their apprenticeship training center from around 100 students about 4 or 5 years ago to over 300 now. And so with increased opportunity and increased training demands, creates the opportunity for technology, like something as simple again as a scheduling app to help facilitate that. Relative to the job site or productivity, we see a lot of opportunity and current application for building information modeling systems, whether it be name your brand name of application, but the use of digital prints in the field is continuing to grow and is certainly provides advantages for our supervision and our skilled tradesmen and ultimately our contractors to accomplish their work. From a safety standpoint, I do think that Jessica had mentioned smartphones. Everyone has access to those, and the built-in cameras that they provide enables us to have better, more timely, more accurate incident reporting or job site inspections. And I think all of those things help push us as an industry towards a safer, more productive, and more transparent team operation.
Okay. And obviously, growth is a huge factor to the industry, and that's something that you touched on there. So that's good. Thank you, Jessica. Where are you seeing the industry headed from your perspective?
Well, sort of like I alluded to earlier on, there's sort of two trends I'd like to sort of highlight and point out here that are happening. And it's not just around games, which, has sort of been my focus, going back to smartphone use. So if you think about this, it's Pew Internet that said well over a year ago that close to 99% of 18 to 29-year-olds own smartphones. Now, if you think about that, that's basically full penetration for smartphones, and the numbers are high for all Americans at every age from 13 up. But that demographic in particular, and what's interesting is that the reliance on smartphones the only commonality of that number is the age group. The reliance on smartphones for online access is especially common among younger adults, but also non-whites and lower income Americans, which means where a lot of folks don't necessarily have access to computers or broadband, they have a smartphone, which they can engage and participate in. And then looking at just media consumption of younger adults, we can talk about, 183 million Americans that play video games, and 97% of teenage boys and 83% of teenage girls, spending 3 billion hours a week engrossed in a game. But it's also media. It's also media consumption, which is part of gaming. It's YouTube videos. How folks consume information is really staggering. So all we're trying to do is sort of ride the waves of those trends and understand that these technologies and these behaviors are training folks essentially, and we bring those into the workplace really easily.
It's quite a great time to be involved on both the construction side and then also the technology side. So it's interesting to see how this is all coming together. So that's great. So can you both talk a little bit about the partnership that you have amongst your groups?
Dave, you want to start?
Sorry, the microphone was off. So looking at advancing where our contractors are moving and how they can continue to excel in their specific field, we look for partnerships like that with SimCoach and what is being done. There are other trade associations, Master Builders Association in Western Pennsylvania that's been working with SimCoach and other partners to help bring technology and this type of application out to our industry, but also then from a information and a recruitment standpoint. So we were excited to bring our labor partners, the Ironworkers, really involved in a recent game development, because it requires everybody to move this effort forward. I think one example of technology for me related to our contractors is that innovation and the adoption of technology is really a workplace culture aspect, and it starts at the top. So we've got contractors that have been involved in highly innovative projects like a accelerated bridge construction project on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, where they built both east and westbound lanes of the Pennsylvania Turnpike to the side, and then were able to slide that bridge deck into place over a long weekend period and only shut down and reroute traffic for 72 hours, I think it was. So that may not be a video game, or it might not be a tangible piece of technology, but it's that innovative culture and the use of technology that enables new projects and new delivery methods like that to be so successful for all users, from the owner at the Pennsylvania Turnpike all the way down to the commuters and travelers on that roadway.
Yeah, and from my perspective, being very specific, we've partnered with the industry and various trades groups on games, or you can also just sort of look at that as agile software development to solve problems. My company, we're great at making games, and we're learning experts, and we're great at iterative software development, but we're not the content experts. And so we partner with industry to really understand what problem are we trying to solve, and how do we know if we've solved it. And then the medium is the game in our case, but we will never be the content experts. So we need to work really, really closely with our partners in order to make sure that we're solving the right problem, understanding the problem we're solving, and then measuring that.
And I really like the culture, the improvement of culture, and how the problem solving skills is coming together as a result of technology. So this is definitely a great partnership for everyone involved. So Jessica, can you talk a little bit about what SimCoach provides for those that may not be aware of that.
Sure. So when we spun this company out of Carnegie Mellon's, its sort of overall vision was, hey, can we go into different industries, different, at that time, large organizations, and solve real world problems using these video games? Essentially, how are you going to train the next generation of workforce? And again, this is back in 2004, 2005 that we really started to look at this. So essentially, we went in to manufacturing companies, construction companies, healthcare, retailers, and a lot of the early stuff, which is interesting because it's still a priority in the work that we do. A lot of the early stuff, there was interest around safety, and so how can you better engage folks on safety, and games are just a great way to show consequences of doing something wrong, and very, very powerful for learning. So we've been generating hundreds of games over the years with respect to productivity training, customer service, sort of soft skills, safety, like I said, and workforce development. How do you sort of pre-qualify a sort of pipeline of workforce as well in these different industries? And so over the years, one thing that we realized is we can create these games, and how are we going to deploy them? And now you see that SimCoach Skill Arcade is our platform, and what that is because we're delivering now, and we weren't early on, obviously, we're delivering now through mobile apps. So we can distribute, for instance, through the app stores. A lot of the games in the Skill Arcade around various industries are free to play. And what the Skill Arcade is able to do is anything from collect data. So if you play one particular game or a suite of particular games, you can get some sort of certificate or badge or assessment of some kind around that, which can be sent or can be tracked and collected and shared if desired. We can also on the platform sort of feed you appropriate actionable information. So for instance, if you play in, I don't know, we have a fun excavator game to sort of give folks an idea of what it might be like to get in, to be an operating engineer, for instance. We can deliver actionable information. If you're good at that game and you like that game, I can sort of give you next steps in our zip code, so in Western PA, which would be different than the actionable information that you would get if you're playing somewhere else in the country. So relevant and actionable based on how you're doing the game and what the game what the game is really attempting to do. So that's sort of an overview of what we do and what the Skill Arcade is all about.
Thanks, Jessica. So how do you see technology opening doors through these games?
Yeah, sure. So, there's a lot of ways. I mean, one thing that it might sort of help to set context here is why we started to do this in the first place, like why we use games. Early on, it was kind of like, oh, kids like games. Let's use games to get their attention. But it goes much deeper than that. Good game design elements actually parallel proven principles for how we learn best and how we teach or how we communicate best. And so if you think about the structure of designing an experience which facilitates technology, you're talking about having clear goals, clear role. You're talking about having feedback. So every choice you make, there's a consequence, whether it's in real time or in the long run when you get a score. It's basically taking a flight simulator effectiveness, but bringing it to pretty much any occupation and any skill set is what sort of the design experience, whether you're talking about game or whatever, to deploy technology can bring. So it opens doors through engaging folks. It's active learning. They have to make choices. They can't really learn how to beat it, so to speak. There's relevancy because it's in the content of the context of the topic that you're talking about. Like we talked about before, generally, there's a data collection component and the connections that can be made from there.
So the games are providing a great connection point, which is, I think, just a great tie-in to our next discussion here is how is that tying in with apprentices?
Sure. So, this is an opportunity to not replace training or not replace these programs that are in place, but reinforcing them and giving folks the ability to practice various skills and the replayability. So replayability is all about, every time you play this, it's going to give you a different look. You can't learn how to beat the test, so to speak. And there's also the benefit of getting people to talk about using games in particular to get people to talk about these things. So if you're in a classroom setting, for instance, and you're playing a game, a lot of times what we've seen that comes up, it's like, hey, I didn't know you're supposed to do it that way. This guy told me that he's been doing it like this for 30 years. And, so it just brings out this really rich and helpful conversation. And it gives you the good platform to do that. As far as tracking training, with respect, to training, I just have a couple examples where we've really seen this to be powerful. So we have this game called Harness Hero, and it's sort of a fall protection reinforcement game. You have to make about 5 or 6 decisions based on the height that you'll be working at as to what equipment is appropriate for that job, inspecting the equipment and donning the equipment. And then basically it's a safety game. So you throw the guy off a building and you see if you made the right decisions. But the way that that's been used is, contractors might look at that and say, hey, I need you to play this 3-minute game before coming on my job. And when you pass the game and you've proven over 3 rounds that you know how to do that, that player can send that data or send that badge or send a certificate directly to that contractor or whatever. So it's sort of a quick way to reinforce and assess that you do know how to do that, and that and have it as sort of top of mind. Another example, we just finished 2 games, 2 apps that are very focused on assessing both for signaling and for rigging, which cuts across several different trades as far as the need for that type of training. And our partners really prioritize assessment. They want you to prove that you know all of the signals when they're applied or how to apply them, as well as taking different looks at rigging setups and making sure that you understand how to calculate your way through that, so that you can apply rigging safely and appropriately every time. And so that is something where we can send certificates or that information in sort of a portal, or however the partner may want to use that assessment criteria or evidence.
Okay. Dave, how are you seeing, or how are the iron workers utilizing technology to train apprentices?
Yeah, so I think Jessica hit on a lot of the key points with the reinforcement of skill sets or safety awareness. The feedback and consequence loop is critical in training, whether you're learning new skills or new process and procedure, or whether you're in a journeyman upgrade training class where maybe you've been doing it for 30 years, as someone had said, but you're looking to understand what new techniques are out there, how can you be safer and more productive with it. In the way that technology is merging with that, you may be familiar with virtual welding machines. Obviously, when done safely and in the proper setting, welding is a managed risk. From a virtual welding experience, though, it's non-threatening. You're not involving the gas or the spark or the flame, and so it can be taught in a conference room, for example. I know our engagement with SimCoach and looking at the game technology. I had some feedback from some of our industry veterans that said you can't train an ironworker with a video game, and you're absolutely right. You can't 100% train an ironworker with a video game, but you can utilize those pieces of technology, maybe those games or those applications, to help reinforce and introduce new technology. If you look at learning styles and different learning abilities, everyone has different. Some people are more auditory, some people are visual. In this industry sector, you've got a lot of people that are very hands-on. They need to work with something and problem solve it and understand it in their own way. So I think utilizing this type of technology allows for different applications and different settings where you can give somebody experience on something that might be very dangerous with a low skill level, but it starts to become comfortable to them and reduces that or lowers that barrier for progress.
Okay, that's very, very helpful in terms of how this is being utilized in technology. So, Dave, can you tell us, have you seen how this approach to supporting training through technology, how has it improved site safety?
So Jessica had mentioned the Harness Hero game. There's another game that they've developed. It's a fall hazard site awareness game, and they've got others as well. But specifically on that one, you have the opportunity for an individual, somebody that's coming on site who isn't familiar maybe with the logistics of what this construction project might be, and it gives them the ability to identify where they find fall hazards or issues, safety issues, and it gives them immediate feedback that can be transmitted, as Jessica had said, to supervision. But from a application, the image here on the screen is of a safety harness, which is one of the most important tools of the trade for the ironworkers who do work at heights. So we try to partner not just with technology companies, but with other vendors and industry experts like MSA. They are a global leader in lots of safety products and lines, fall protection being one of them, and they happen to be based here in Western Pennsylvania. So we take the opportunity to work with them, work with their engineering and design team, so that they can get feedback from real users, whether it be on the job site, whether it be in the training center. We had their engineering design team come down and take a tour, spend a few hours with both the instructors and some of the apprentices to gain firsthand voice of customer feedback and share what technology they're working on. Some things that they've got in development would be a smart harness system, where you've got sensors through the use of technology, both in terms of the lanyard and the anchorage points, and those sensors have the ability to talk to each other. Not only could it be a notification of, you're in an area now where you need to tie off, but it could also then give the feedback of, did that person comply and tie off? Were they working safely in this designated area, or did they not? And what the consequences of those actions could be from a supervision or a project standpoint. Looking at other pieces of PPE, head protection is something that's critical in construction. It's mostly unchanged in the last 30 years or so. The traditional hard hat has not really been a technological mover, but there is the adoption now of more of a climbing, a mountaineering or a rock climbing style hard hat, which has much more side and rear head protection. A lot of the incidents of the falls and the injuries that come from that, the user may have been wearing a hard hat, but that fell off during the fall. So some of these new hard hats also utilize a chin strap. I think some things do present challenges for adoption. I think most construction users are going to fight back against the chin strap, but it does take time for these types of advancements to roll out and to see that wide adoption. I think the fall protection, when you think of ironworkers, you think of fall protection and working at heights, and so those would be the two places where I definitely see the safety and the technology kind of coming together.
Okay. Thanks, Dave. So now let's take the technology into a way that we can actually, move forward our industry. So if you could talk a little bit about how technology can introduce the younger generation to the trade, I think that would be interesting for our participants.
Would you like me to?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, the theme throughout this, at least for me, is sort of looking at the trends of technology consumption with the younger generation. I mean, the younger generation, and now we're not talking that young, grew up with not only digital media but interactivity, meaning the ability to adapt with technology and participate in the conversation with technology, not just be consumers but be producers. And so the younger generations are sort of just bringing this naturally, the comfort around this with really interesting ideas on how to solve problems with technology design, which is really cool to see. And so they're very comfortable engaging, and it's also a relevant way to engage, which I don't think anyone that has seen folks, under 2025 would debate. But it's a comfortable way to engage folks and get them to come to their own conclusions about what something is all about.
I think it's also important to note that, as Jessica mentioned, the age and the introduction to the trades. Many people have the mindset that construction, or union construction specifically, is it's a family thing, right? Your father, your uncles, your aunts, your grandfather, whomever have been in this, and so you've been exposed to it your whole life, and that's really the way into it. But I think we as an industry have to help break that model, and being able to have something that meets people where they are. Jessica mentioned the numbers on smartphone users and video game players, and so to be able to have something that's informative, that's engaging, and that piques the interest and can deliver more accurate information to them if it does show promise for them, or they are interested in pursuing it, I think is really important for us to do. The average age of apprentices now is 26, and that's continuing to climb, which means people are getting other career experiences, whether they go to a traditional higher education institution or whether they go to the military or some other job. We're seeing people come into these apprenticeship programs now with other life and other professional experiences. And so we want to be mindful of helping to introduce this as a positive option at a younger age, so that maybe they're able to jump into these at 18, 19, 20, 21, as opposed to 26, 27, 28, and 29.
Right. And obviously that will help the entire industry. So that's good. Dave, can you tell us from your perspective where you see technology and construction heading together?
Sure. I think two areas where people think most often about technology and construction would be robotics. Are machines going to replace humans in some of the jobs, roles, and functions that we have? The other piece would be the artificial intelligence and how we interact with or utilize data and information from the digital space and our reality. So from a robotics standpoint, there are companies that as Jessica had mentioned, hers is one of them, that spin out from great institutions like Carnegie Mellon, and one of those that specializes in robotics is advanced construction. They've got two products. One's been out for a few years. It's called TieBot. The other one was just announced at a global conference in April of this year called IronBot. But effectively, this looks at the reinforcing or using horizontal rebar in a roadway, bridge deck, etc., and ties those rebars together with tie wire. This is a very repetitive job for those skilled tradespeople that engage in it, and so in that repetitive nature, it creates opportunities for injuries, long-term, career, life-impacting repetitive injuries. So looking at the use of robotics or technology to help eliminate some of that potential risk for injury, or the skilled labor shortages that we face in different parts of the country and different industry sectors. This is a great example of the use of of technology to address those challenges. I also think it's important to note about this that this company works with the ironworkers, the Ironworkers International. They've had conversations there to get them on board with it, so that it's not this machine is going to replace our jobs and our people, but it's how can this machine become a tool of the trade? How can we utilize this to help further our careers, our people, our industry? So I think that's an important piece to note as well. The Iron Bot actually takes that process a step further, and it will lay the rebar into the appropriate places, and then the tie bot can come in and tie things together. So those are two kind of interesting pieces that utilize robotics and direct application to construction. The other piece would be the artificial intelligence and that integration. The individual in the picture there has got a virtual reality or an augmented reality headset on, and is interacting or seemingly interact with some sort of digital plan in front of them. Microsoft HoloLens is one product out there. It gets a lot of notoriety, being that it's a Microsoft produced product. Takes that virtual reality, mixed reality environment and allows you to interact with those BIM plans, data sets. Another piece that is interesting is Struction Sight. It's a video software system that integrates with the BIM data and the plans, and it creates a more comprehensive, usable data set for owners and contractors. I think the statistics are something that it captures around 30,000 square feet of data in a 5-minute walk around the job site. And so as our professionals are walking the job site, identifying productivity items or progress or safety related items, software and technology like this will help not just gather data, because the data is only going to be good if it's usable and if it's in a responsible package, but it'll help them interact with that data and make more meaningful decisions, both in the immediate and in the long term as a project progresses.
Good. So believe it or not, it sounds like construction is actually embracing technology, huh?
Yeah, in many ways it is.
That's good. That's good. I'm going to ask the same question now to Jessica, a little differently though. How you mentioned earlier how games are being promoted to younger generations. Can you talk a little bit about how that is becoming more and more of a reality, and what does it mean for the construction industry?
Yeah, so when we think about this, it's really not about competing with the games that everyone knows about. The Fortnites of the world. There's a lot of different media consumption behaviors that the folks that we want to get these games, they'll play a game, but there needs to be a marketing component of it, a strategy of it. So it can't just be promoting sort of through your channels. So in the construction industry, if you have a game and it's the best game in the world and it hits everything to recruit or train folks in the industry, if you're sending it out to your LinkedIn group, it's probably just going to hit other professionals that are already sort of in there. Not necessarily, the youth or next generation of workforce there. So, you need to have a strategy that promotes it where the youth are, and understand the policies around how these things can be used in schools through workforce investment boards and through some other channels. And then the other thing really is getting it into a group of some hands where you have that authentic buy-in, because the modern sort of word of mouth is really through social sharing. If I have an experience and I'm able to quickly show you, hey, check this out, in a way that's relevant, that's really, really, really powerful. I mean, with mobile games, obviously, easy way to distribute is through the app stores, but that's not how you promote the games. That's just sort of a distribution strategy. So it needs to be done thoughtfully, but essentially, it's thinking through how you're going to market to folks that aren't in your industry circle.
So a lot of this then ultimately comes down to messaging and marketing, is what you're saying, once it's developed.
I believe so. Yeah, and let it sort of take on a life of its own as well, as it sort of start picking up.
Good. Okay. So here's a question for more of a general question, but how do Dave and Jessica, how do you see technology actually helping to win business? And if you're a participant and you have thoughts on this, please feel free to submit through the chat and let us know. But Dave, Jessica, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think many of us have experienced going back maybe before the Great Recession, but certainly 2008, 2009, and moving forward, this mentality of doing more with less. It's just been the nature of the beast, and I think there's a far superior option to that, and that would be do better with less. And I think that's where technology can really be the asset. There's a study that I think it was done by Harvard Business Review, their analytics services, that early technology adopters have better business outcomes. They have increased revenue and growth and market position. And so I think that we can't ignore that in the construction industry just because it's not a high-tech Silicon Valley type of business. The productivity and safety improvements at a craft person level in the field are very real. And obviously, if it's a tight margin business, which construction is, you need every competitive advantage that you can get. So if you've got some technology, whether it be at any stage of your process, that's going to help you stay on track, stay on budget, be ahead of schedule, that is going to be a huge feather in your cap, and will ultimately continue to help you gain new business and win additional business with repeat customers. So I do think it's got to be a culture approach. I think it's got to be, the adoption of that and how this is going to make all of us as a team better. But the results are out there.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah, I would just add, I mean, look, the capabilities, the sort of democratization of being able to simulate and visualize things, even in the last 10 years, is just, it just accelerated. And then you add this layer of interactivity on top of that, and data collection. It's really, really powerful. If I have 30 seconds, I'll give two examples of this in the last 10 years, where so we were working with a hospital, a very large hospital that was being built, and they had the blueprints. They sort of were ready to go, but they couldn't start construction, and they needed to raise money for the building. And we used our gaming technology to create 3D visualizations of exactly what it would look like, how it would feel. We were even able to put sponsorship information in there in order to raise that money well before the hospital was built. But what also happened out of that exercise is, the hospital went back to the contractor and said, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. And through the visualizations, we're able to figure out a lot of things before they actually started to build. We, evolved looking at that with respect to a sort of a smart streets initiative that was worked on, where you can take sort of Google satellite type information, and you can add a layer of interactivity on top of that, and basically go to buildings. So say if you're looking at a street and you want to design a street to function in a certain way, well, what happens to the buildings around there? What if you add 20 floors to a building? What if you open it at the street, more of a retail? What if you do these different things? What happens to the pedestrians? What happens if you have the data on the energy in a building? So how do you pull all of that information to make more informed decisions, not necessarily on the very, very, very technical sort of simulation side, but just to have conversation with high-level stakeholders. This is what it's going to look like. Well, if we change these factors, we're going to have, these factors compromised, and being able to quickly sort of do that on the fly for presentation, decision-making, efficiency, all of these things. So those are just two examples of how we've seen similar technology actually make money or save money for the industry.
Thank you both for that. I know we're running a little bit over time, and we started a little bit late, and I apologize for that. So we've just got a couple real quick things to wrap up, and then we'll be able to call it a day. But with that, Dave, can you give some thoughts on how technology quickly is really improving the industry?
Sure. I think some of the buttons on the screen here have been touched on a little bit in terms of safety training with virtual reality or wearables, and the technology maybe in a smart sensor with a harness. That would go to smart clothing as well. I think the sensors on tools is one interesting thing that we've not talked about. I'll go to the fall protection side again. We're seeing a push from major industry vendors like DeWalt and others looking at attachments and fall protection related to tools. So making sure that they've got that they're tied off when you're working at heights, and what does that do to the safety of falling objects on a project for those people working below you. So I think there's technology there. Just simply if we go with the tool aspect again of looking at how many cordless options are available now for different construction applications, and the technology that goes into the development of those pieces. The self-driving vehicles, I think, maybe is a bigger conversation related to how computer systems, how technology communicates with each other, and what level of control and regulation do we have on that. But I can see that self-driving vehicles are going to make an impact, especially in the civil end of things, where you've got highly specialized equipment that is already operating with advanced computer systems, and the users that are highly skilled, trained individuals that operate those vehicles. So I think there's plenty of opportunity there for each of these in the future.
So a lot of things are coming in the future, is what you're saying, right?
The future looks bright.
That's good. That's good. So just to recap here, what we've heard today is that we have a much more productive workforce as a result of technology. I know we didn't really talk about reducing training costs, but I know that that's one of the advantages of utilizing technology. And obviously, as you heard earlier, the partnership element of pulling together the right people to work on how to improve the industry is a definite and a positive to the industry. And obviously incorporating the younger generations that will help push the industry forward is a fantastic thing for everyone involved. So with that, I want to say thank you to both Jessica and Dave for your input and your feedback and your time, most importantly. But thank you for participating. I encourage you to find the recordings of our previous webinars at the ironworkerslocal404.org site. And if you have any additional questions, I'll leave the slide up on the screen, and you can email Jessica or Dave directly. And lastly, feel free to download the games. SimCoachGames.com/games are your place to download and play the games. And by all means, please feel free to share feedback. Again, Jessica, Dave, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for participating. Be safe and have a great day.